of the United Workers' Party. We just want to welcome you to our program this evening as we continue to, you know, discuss issues, current issues, pertinent issues, issues of our development right here in Dominica, things affecting us and those we need to change. And the United Workers' Party continues to be very consistent over the years in ensuring that we bring the issues to you. So I would just like to first, I always do that, try to reach out and touch some individuals who have lost loved ones. Just want to reach out and touch them this evening. And first is the family of Mr. Dorian Philogent of Cordiho. I just want to reach out and touch his family, extend sympathies to them. And I know that one of his in-laws, Mr. My good friend in Florida, Paben, I want to reach out and extend sympathies to the entire family of the wife of Mr. Maynard Joseph. She'll be laid to rest, I think, sometime next week, 29th of this month. Just want to extend sympathies to the entire family in Viejas. Mr. Joseph, how are you doing? Good evening to you, my friend. The family of Mr. Gibson Frederick of Salisbury, who passed recently, suddenly. He was the father of my brother, Vincent Frederick. We all know him in Salisbury as Mushi, so I just want to extend sympathies to the entire family, Gibbs, Murphy, those in Monrachet, in Salisbury. Just want to extend sympathies to you. Sonia, his wife, his daughter Kay as well in the States. Just want to reach out and say good evening to you, sympathies. The family of Veron George of Salisbury as well, Vernel, Andy, Ken, and all the others. Just want to extend sympathies to you. Charlene, sympathies to you on the passing of Veron. Mr. Militon Prosper of Pidisufuya. Just want to extend sympathies to his entire family, all the family of Mr. Militon Prosper, who was buried. I just want to extend sympathies to each and every one of you. And also to the families, to my aunt in Maho, passed away just last week. Alvina Harry, just want to extend sympathies to her children and everybody, grandchildren in Maho. Her only surviving brother on my side, on my father's side, Setilis in Fonkole. Good evening to you. And all her families in Maho, family in Maho, Salisbury, Portsmouth, Fonkole. Just want to extend sympathies to each and every one of you on the passing of my aunt, Mrs. Alvina Harry of Maho. So we just want to reach out and touch each and every one of you who have lost loved ones along the way. I heard that the young man who got shot in Bellevue Chopin, I just want to reach out and touch his family as well. A very unfortunate situation, but just want to touch each and every one of you who have lost loved ones along the way. Just want to reach out and touch all our friends at home and abroad who are listening to the Work of Voice this evening. Joseph Hunter, how are you doing, my good friend? My brother is on island, Usfield John. Angelo in La Pointe, in Loubier. He's a Brooklyn boy, but he's in Loubier. They came down for the cricket. That's all of you who visiting right now, those of you on vacation, we're here in Dominica. I just want to reach out and say hello to you. A good evening to you, and those of you listening to us via Q95 radio on Facebook and also on Q95 FM online. Just want to reach out and touch you. So this evening, we're in for another powerful program. As always, United Workers' Party. In studios with me is from my neighbor from the Collier constituency and the General Secretary of the United Workers' Party, Mr. Nicholas George. Mr. George, welcome. I see you have your fair start looking sharp. That's your mic there. I think, yes, it should be working. Go ahead.
Yes,
Mr. George, welcome and good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Honorable Elector John, and good evening to the constituents of the Collier constituency that comprises the villages of Bioche, Jubla, and Collier. And I too want to extend my sympathies to the family of the deceased Dorian Philogent Philogene was married to a cousin of mine. And we were good friends in the village of Collier. So we're just inviting everybody to sit back and relax. Those who are outside of the Collier constituency in Dominica and overseas who are listening, we want you to participate in this evening's program.
It makes it look like the whole world missed me. I just want to reach out. Raymond John Baptist in Antigua. Pointy, I think he's on island as well. He came in for the cricket. He's listening to mine, and each and every one of you listening, sending me messages. You fairly listening as well. Just want to say good night to you. And also, I heard of a death in Maho as well, a sudden death. I just didn't confirm. Call the name. I don't know call the name. I know the lady very well. I know her daughter, and I just want to extend sympathies to them as well in Maho. I didn't confirm, but I heard of that death, so I just want to reach out and touch you, my friend, and the family on this shocking death in Maho. If anybody have information that's confirmed for me on this one, yes, Mr. George. Everybody want to say good evening, and I just want to reach out and touch them. But tonight, Mr. George, we'll be discussing a few issues. And some of it has to do with electoral reform, and also where we are, the present situation we have with the UK. You know, it's a very interesting situation that we cannot overlook. We must at least touch it where we are. We have some information to play as well, and tonight we will talk in the CBI program as well, and the sales, the numbers will be reaching out, and that is very important, Mr. Road. Well, I just want to bring something to the discussion as we start.
Yeah, but before you go on, I find the studios are a bit cold. And no, I would just like some Thai.
Some Thai. Some Lipton Thai.
Yeah, like some Lipton Thai, man.
A copper of Lipton. It's not can I.
Ain't it?
Any. And my friend would tell me it's not. Can I have a cup of tea? Is may I have a cup of Thai?
There you go.
Okay. Yes. There's a situation that over the past 24 hours that have developed with our CBI program, and it has to do simply with due diligence. Our Prime Minister today, Roosevelt Skerrit, had a recorded address. And he brushed over due diligence. But if you look at every article that has come out in the past 24 hours from the UK, it has to do with due diligence. You know, and where people, they have denied entry into the UK because of quote unquote the characters, they ended up getting Dominican passport and trying to get into the UK. And instead for the Prime Minister to address this very serious issue, he skirted away. But what happened? The British was going to introduce a new form of ETA. I was just trying to get the proper name for the acronym, ETA. That you have to apply. I think they have been doing it, phasing it out in different countries. You have to apply to come to the UK. You're not be getting visa, but they want to know who come into the UK, all the information, so they can know in advance who they are accepting, and they will not have all that backlog and sending back people. But in advance, they'll tell you, no, okay, do not come because of X, Y, Z. That you do not meet the criteria to enter in England. And they have been phasing it out. But within the past 24 hours, they placed immediate sanctions on Dominica because we failed to meet some of the requirements they have asked us. You know, recently they asked us about 6 principles with the UK and some other countries that we have to meet in terms of due diligence is one of them. Giving information, making information readily available, accessible, accountability and whatnot. And we have not seen that. And the Prime Minister failed to address what was the reason and what is the main reasons why the sanctions were imposed on Dominica within the just yesterday on the 19th. You saw the documents came in on the 18th to take action on the 19th
Yeah.
in Parliament. It was not like they waited for a few days. Within hours, it was passed, and by 3 p.m., that became law in England yesterday on the 19th.
Well, we have to call, unfortunately, we have to call the Prime Minister, we have to accord him the name of Prime Minister in Dominica, because his position as Prime Minister has not been challenged in a court, and the court has not declared that he has been illegally elected.
Yeah.
That should have been done in the 2009 election, when the Prime Minister, under his pen, his own signature, asked the then French ambassador to Dominica, who was resident in St. Lucia, to revoke his citizenship. Well, actually, he didn't use the word revoke, he used renunciation.
Right.
I think the ambassador would have addressed the issue of revocation. A renunciation comes from the applicant, really. So he is the one who has to renounce his citizenship. And we know what happened to that court matter. It lasted 3 years, and then the court decided in his favor. And since that time, we have had trouble. But when you go to what happened in the past 24 hours, one has to note that the Prime Minister had been in Europe between Sunday and Tuesday. He was attending a joint European and Caribbean Latin American conference in Europe. And the report stated that on the side of that meeting, the Prime Minister would be meeting with European leaders on the issue of the CBI.
Yep.
So if we have to take what we read in the report as true, it means that the British would probably have been in that meeting in Europe. He has not said that. He has not said that the British were present. But this is of concern to the British as well. And I would have expected that the British would have taken the opportunity to attend the meeting, send a diplomat, whatever it is. But the meeting had not yet ended, whilst the British people were writing what it is they were going to pass in Parliament to impose visa restrictions on Dominica. And as you rightly said, the Prime Minister did not speak to whether Britain had an official at the meeting, the sidebar, if you want to call it, between himself, other Caribbean leaders who host CBI programs in their countries, and European leaders. So the meeting was twofold. It's really a meeting between the Caribbean and Latin American governments and the European, and a specific agenda item on the side of that meeting to discuss CBI. So he did not speak about due diligence. But how do you expect? I really do not expect the Prime Minister to address the issue of due diligence, because the Prime Minister is not diligent himself in the administration of Dominica. So he doesn't understand the word diligence. It is foreign to him. He probably heard about due diligence now in the communiques coming from England. He's not been diligent in looking after the agricultural sector in Dominica. He went to Trinidad. He's boasting that he's the chair of CARICOM. Let's tell the people that the chair is a rotating position and he's holding it for 6 months.
6 months.
All right, but he's the chair. And then when he got an opportunity to speak about food security in the region, he was not diligent. He mentioned that you could buy agricultural produce from Guyana, from St. Lucia, from Barbados, from Antigua, from Trinidad, and he failed to mention Dominica.
He was more about the eyelashes.
Yes, so he went. You understand what I'm saying? Now, Dominica is supposed to be the premier agricultural country in the Windward Islands and in the Caribbean. We've managed to produce the finest agricultural products in the Caribbean. But he knew that he had not been diligent there. His government had not been diligent there, and so on. So to extend diligence in his repertoire from Dominica to the wider world is to be expecting too much from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister actually should demit office. And there are enough issues that have come up on the radar that any Prime Minister who is diligent and have been so neglectful of his duties would have resigned.
And I'm with you with 100%, Mr. George. But let me just touch from an Antiguan online newspaper today. Today's the 20th, yes, by Robert A. Emanuel. And I quote, according to the UK government, concerns surrounding Dominica's program include, number one, poor due diligence around applications, including those of dependent. Two, the provision for name changes upon receipt of citizenship. Three, the lack of residency requirement for applicants. And four, the granting of citizenship to nationals of other countries who ordinarily require visas to enter the UK, consequently leading to increased level of asylum applicants. So you see what the Prime Minister of Dominica is dumping on the UK, using our passport, and have freeloaders dumping themselves in the UK. And the first one, poor due diligence around applications, including those of dependents. And Mr. George, I want us to begin to put sanctions on the Prime Minister. The United Nations, the United Kingdom asked the government of Dominica and other CBI countries to do A, B, C, and D. If you realize, only country in the Caribbean that got that immediate sanction is Dominica and Vanuatu in the Pacific Ocean. Two CBI countries. So if the UK can put sanctions on the Prime Minister for failing to meet the requirements in terms of due diligence and people using our passport to go into the UK for the back door and creating a problem or compromising the security architecture, we should put sanctions on the Prime Minister to ensure that they get our money into Dominica, the $7.9 billion missing into Dominica by a certain time. We should put sanctions on the Prime Minister for us to have electoral reform by a certain date. We should put sanctions on this Prime Minister to demit office as soon as possible. You see, where we are right now, Mr. George, is a serious crossroad. And we cannot continue to pussyfoot with the Prime Minister, making jokes about it. We have to take actions as Dominicans. I've seen some young business individuals, small business owners crying, families crying. Everybody's been affected. And no one wants to take action. They want to leave everything for the the United Workers' Party and other pressure groups. For you to see the type of change that you want in country, we have to do it together and place serious sanctions on the Prime Minister and his government to ensure that we get the result that we want as Dominicans. And that is where I am right now. We should place sanctions on the Prime Minister. No pussyfooting, no joking, no blowing hot on cold, no sitting on the fence, but joining in one accord to ensure that we take back Dominica.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. But, I can't leave a certain place as far as I'm concerned with the Prime Minister.
Let me just say that quickly before I forget. I'm sorry, but I want to extend sympathies to the family of Fiona John Baptist of Monrachet, who passed recently as well. She was the sister of Geraldine, John Baptist, and all the others in Monrachet. I just want to extend sympathies to Fiona, the family of Fiona, her children, and other family members.
Yes. The first thing we have to expect certain things. We have to put the Prime Minister and his government in perspective.
Yeah.
That government has not addressed itself to governance of Dominica in the way that one expects that an administration should govern a country. So they have not concerned themselves with that. They've concerned themselves with hijacking feasts. So the Catholic Church established itself those thousands of years ago,
Right.
and the Pope over the time has said, well, certain people would be saints, and then they ascribe those saints to parishes, and they put a system, and Dominica is part of that system, and there are 10 parishes, and each of those parishes have parish feasts.
Yeah.
And in the case of Collioure, the Feast of St. Peter, which was celebrated. But every advertisement you see is the honorable, and that's what they're concerned about. Their legacy to remain in power, to continue to impoverish our country. That's their policy.
Not only hijacking feasts, they even hijacking graduation ceremonies now.
Anything, they're hijacking CWO, they're hijacking anything just to draw attraction and attention to themselves, they hijack it.
Yeah.
All right. So it was no surprise that we had the Prime Minister being uninformed of what a court may have termed an abduction in Trinidad,
right,
and paralleled with what happened in Dominica. But those two matters, the Choksi matter and the one in Trinidad, they're both before the court, and we hope one day we will hear from the courts on their determination as to what is there. So the first thing is this Prime Minister has been neglectful in his duties in Dominica. He has been concerned with bringing himself and his family and his friends and his enablers up. So the $7.9 or $7.6 billion that is missing and unaccounted for, it's not in Dominica. The product that attracted that kind of money is a Dominican asset, our passport. And then we have the Prime Minister is the political head of his government. He's also the executive head of the government. And therefore, he has a number of civil servants who are under his administration. So we have the financial secretary who doesn't speak to us and tells us properly what is happening with the finances. We have the Auditor General. We have the Director of Audit. And we have the other permanent secretaries whose duty it is to spend after parliamentary approval of the budgetary estimates.
So, Mr. George, on that note, we'll take some information on that was tabulated by Mr. Linton on the missing monies, and we will expound on it further. Seeing that you have opened the discussion, I will just play this clip and let Dominicans listen.
Last year, during the budget exercise, we heard from the government, Minister of Finance, that Dominica was going to raise $492,154,103 from Citizenship by Investment. And it was going to do that, and it will receive, it was planning to receive $210,791 from certificates of naturalization. I want you to do the math on that, because we have the figure, you have the figure, you've taken it down, $679.23 per certificate of naturalization. So if we collected $210,791 from certificate of naturalization, you realize that we would have given citizenships to 310 persons. Now, those 310 persons, if you're going to get $492.2 million from 310 persons to whom you have sold citizenship, it means you're getting $1,585,852 per citizen, or US $583,699. We said in the parliament last year that was impossible. And so the government needed to rework those numbers because the formula, the revenue generation formula under the CBI program does not allow any individual to give more than 109,000 US dollars. Here, the government was saying last year it could get as much as 583,699 US dollars per citizen in CBI revenue. The government also told us last year that for the year 2021-2022, its certificate of naturalization revenue was $193,754. Do the math again, divide that by $679.23. You're going to get an amount of 285 citizens. Those 285 citizens, the government told us from those 285 citizens, it got in 2021-2022, $452,690,895. We said that was impossible because, again, the average per citizen was $1,586,955 or $584,105 US dollars, which is impossible. The program cannot give you any more than 109,000 US dollars per citizen by formula for revenue generation. They said all sorts of things, but they never addressed the question. Nobody responded to these questions, these queries that were placed on the record in the budget debate of last year. They have come now this year, interestingly, with a correction of those numbers. Listen carefully. For 2021-2022, instead of $193,754 in revenue from certificate of naturalization, meaning 285 citizenships, their figure now for 2021-2022 is $4,286,185. Listen carefully. Last year, they told us 2021-2022 yielded certificate of naturalization revenue at $193,754, 285 citizens. Now they're telling us that same year, the revenue from certificate of naturalization was really $4,286,185, which means we handed citizenships to 6,310 persons, not 285, as they told us back then. They also corrected the numbers for 2022-2023 because they were projecting last year $210,791 in certificate of naturalization revenue, which means 310 citizens. That number is now corrected to $7,002,424 from $210,791. The certificate of naturalization revenue figure for 2022-2023 is $7,002,424, which means $10,000 309 citizens when you do the division by $679.23. So with these corrected numbers now, you have 6,202 citizens who received their passports and took certificates of naturalization in 2020, 2021, 6,202. 2021, 2022, 6,310. And 2022, 2023, 10,309 citizens. So for those 3 years, 22,822 people received the citizenship of Dominica. Now, remember, the 4-year period, 2016 to 2020, we had a total of 23,794 persons who received citizenship. And over that period of time, $1,213,248,791 came into the Treasury. In respect of this period, these last 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023, a total of 22,822 persons received citizenship. And that brought into the Treasury $1,528,685,106. It means that for the 7-year period, 2016 to 2023, a total of 46,615 persons received citizenship of Dominica under the Citizenship by Investment Program. 46,615. And then the amount of money that came into the Treasury for that period was $2,741,933,897. But there's a problem with that number, because it means the average amount of money that the government now claims it picked up from each of those 46,615 people is less than 70,000 EC dollars per person. So now you have to understand that back in 2021, we got a figure from the Prime Minister in the Parliament where he told us all of the sales of citizenship that took place under the different options and so on. And when he added up the number of citizenships that were granted and the amount that was received, the average amount received per citizen was $227,573 EC dollars. That's less than 100,000 US. And you can understand that that is a workable average, a reasonable average that can be used. It is not credible that in this entire citizenship program, we are selling passports for $24,654 per person or $20,000 per person US, or $51,000 per person EC, or $66,000 per person EC. That's ludicrous. The real figure that we have used to update is what the Prime Minister gave us in the Parliament from the numbers he presented when we asked him what happened to the revenues over the past 3 years. But then we did a second check to look at the certificate of naturalization revenue and do a recalculation of the number of persons that receive passports. And then we used the Prime Minister's average. The average from the Prime Minister's numbers at $227,573 EC dollars per citizen in revenue. So now, if you take this average revenue per citizen of $227,573 and you multiply it by the number of persons who got citizenship over that 7-year period, 46,615 people, you come to a figure of $10,608,305,140. Again, the revenue amount from the sale of 46,615 Dominican citizenships over the past 7 years, 2016 to 2023, is $10,608,305,140. What came into the Treasury? $2,741,933,897, leaving an unaccounted balance of $7,866,371,243. Again, the unaccounted balance from the sale of citizenships of Dominica over the past 7 years is $7,866,371,243. $7.9 billion. A billion is 1,000 million. Our passports are on the international market. 46,615 of them were sold over the past 7 years. And from the revenue amount of $10.6 billion, we only received $2.7 billion, leaving an unaccounted balance of $7.9 billion EC dollars. So we're no longer talking 4.2 billion. We're asking the government of Dominica to account for this $7.9 billion.
Yes, you're listening to the Workers' Voice. You just heard a recent update and breakdown of how much money that we have outside of Dominica in terms of our CBI, funds from CBI. We are listening to the Workers' Voice here in studios is Mr. Nicholas George, our General Secretary. You heard our president making that presentation. We're going to open the lines in a while for you to join us. 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097. Those of you on the overseas line, 305 432-9624, 305-432-9624. And those of you who want to reach us via WhatsApp, the number is 767-265-4334, 767-265-4334. Say good evening to Mr. Peter Thomas and his wife down there in New Jersey. I just want to say good night as well. And sympathies to Julian Newton of Laplin on the passing of his dad. I just want to extend sympathies. Mr. George, you heard the breakdown by Mr. Linton, and I took some notes, but I don't want Dominicans to understand. For the past 7 years, we have given citizenship to 46,615 individuals who were not born in Dominica, but purchased citizenship of Dominica. These people can come home, come back to Dominica and just put us outside. We have about, on average, maybe right now, our population in Dominica, seriously, the average might be about 65,000. The 2021 census is still ongoing in 2023. So we are not sure what is the exact figure of population that we have. And also, you're hearing that these 46,615 citizens who purchase the passport and the right to be Dominicans, we brought us $10.7 billion in revenue. But we can only account for 2.1 billion reaching our treasury. Mr. George, that's $7.9 billion. Dominicans should be on the road tomorrow morning. Dominicans should lock down the country by tomorrow morning, even tonight, and demand from Roosevelt, Skerritt, and the other rogues where that $7.9 billion is, or where they have it, and to get it back into Dominica. And that is why I believe there's another reason that I believe I comment to you in a while. Why the British has taken that type of drastic actions in Dominica. And don't be surprised if the French, if the US and the others do that as well. Because you cannot have all that money coming from the sales of our passports cannot be accounted for. We do not have paracetamol in the hospital. We don't have IV catheters in the hospital. Our nurses have to walk home in the nights to meet their children after working 2 shifts. Our police officers have to go and buy and working in SSU have to go out there and buy their clothes and get things and then bring the bill to the police headquarters, and they will pay them as we go along. That is where we are, Mr. George, right now. Our children at universities around the world cannot get the transcripts, cannot get register for the new classes because our government has failed to pay the tuitions and other fees. But we have $7.9 billion out there in the hands of people like Anthony Hayden. And we're sitting here as Dominicans, and the new frame is Chupul, Sakifet Fet, and we are not demanding from Roosevelt Skerrit. Dominica should be closed down by tonight. The 25th of this month, next week, is Parliament. There should be no Parliament in Dominica. Dominicans should begin to stand up. Stop it. Stop what is going on. Remove that rogue. Demand that we get answers. Not wait for answers, but demand answers. And Mr. George, before I come to you, I just want to remind Dominicans, and especially the supporters of United Workers' Party, when our Labourite friends are coming across or coming along or asking for help, let us welcome them with our arms wide open. They were brothers and sisters in the fight together, even though it's 20 years later, but they're beginning to understand what is going on. And we should not run them away. We should welcome them as brothers and sisters in the struggle. They are brothers and sisters. Because right now, the rain that falling, the rain of terror, the rain of economic stagnant, what is it? Economic stagnation, that's the word. Economic stagnation right now. We all feeling it. Those of us who have to go to hospital, our children cannot get the medication. Those of us who we are in the delivery room and you can get painkillers. There were sons and daughters, there were wives, there were aunties, irrespective of what party they support. So when they're when you hear them speaking, when we hear the Matthew Walters and the others speaking, don't tell them, say, Zokimete Nula. Better late than never. Welcome him, encourage him, and we will encourage the others. We have to do it collectively to remove that rogue. And there should be no parliament in Dominica on the 25th. That is my call. We should demand that Roosevelt Skerrit and his crew demit office. Because that 7.9 million will go a long way to making the lives of Dominicans better. Mr. George.
Mr. George, in the past,
Hold on. Let me just put on the mic.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In the past, I have addressed the issue of governance. And, one hasn't had to go to University of the West Indies to follow a discipline or study a discipline that qualifies you to be prime minister or parliamentary representative. But if you attend the university or your school or you do your own homeschooling, and you are clothed in ethical standards, moral values, and good virtues, then you can lead. All right. But there's a document called the Constitution, and I want to go there because for what I'm going to say in the follow-up. At the preamble of the Constitution is what begins to establish the principles upon which the Prime Minister should govern. And it says at the beginning, whereas the people of Dominica have affirmed that the Commonwealth of Dominica is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, faith in fundamental human rights and freedoms, the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions, the dignity of the human person, and the equal and inalienable rights with which all members of the human family are endowed by their Creator. Respect the principles of social justice and therefore believe that the operation of the economic system should result in so distributing the material resources of the community as to subserve the common good, that there should be adequate means of livelihood for all. And this one hurts me because I must call the word, that labor should not be exploited or forced by economic necessity to operate in inhumane conditions, but that there should be opportunity for advancement on the basis of recognition of merit, ability, and integrity. This preamble goes on, but it is in the two paragraphs, A and B, we find so much. One, that we are a godly people. Yeah. So the people have declared that they acknowledge the supremacy of God. And it is God himself that directs us to obey our leaders because they're supposed to be godly. Therefore, everything that this prime minister and his government, his executive should be doing must be godly. And it must be seen to be godly. These are contained in the preamble to the Constitution. So before you can go to Article 1 of the Constitution, you must find out what it is the people of Dominica require you to do before you can go to Article 1. And hear what paragraph B says. Respect the principle of social justice. It goes to what you just said. 10 billion accruing to Dominica. 2.5 billion enters this treasury. 2.1, 7.9 is missing. Then you cannot respect the principles of social justice if you are leaving $7.9 billion raised by selling a national product or sovereignty, and you leave it overseas. Then you impose upon us 46,000 new people who can buy a passport for $100,000. So they can buy any piece of land in Dominica at $100,000. Because each one of these applicants, each one of these new citizens is a millionaire.
Yeah. And in 7 years, 7 years.
Yeah. Well, no, what I'm trying to say here is, so it doesn't take rocket science to find out with the way and the way they have been courted and so on, that each one of them is a millionaire and therefore they can buy our island many times over. Yeah. And why someone this buying thing? You know, I might be wrong, but something tells me that after paying $200,000 or $270,000 US in an approved project, the policy goes on to say that you can sell that which you purchased. You can sell it and recoup your $250,000 US. So if you bought shares or whatever it is, you bought a villa at Secret Bay, then you are by law to hold it for at least 3 or 5 years. But after 5 years, you can sell. And if you recoup your money, didn't you get the passport now for nothing? Really, after 5 years, doesn't it? And then anybody who is a descendant, how much more does it cost them if you became a descendant after you've purchased the passport? Because I know now that it is difficult for a Dominican, a person born of Dominican parentage, born overseas, of Dominican parentage, have difficulty in getting their citizenship.
Yep.
Okay? So right there in the Constitution, in the preamble, it requires an administrative system that holds people accountable. So Mr. Linton has put out these figures here.
Yeah.
And I'm not really going to quote them. We're just going to play this thing and we're going to put it on a leaflet and we're going to spread it all around Dominica so that people make it colorful.
Good.
No permanent secretary has written a report on their stewardship and laid it in Parliament to say what happened to the money that was approved 2022, 2023 for them to spend. Because it is the permanent secretaries the Constitution recognizes as the accounting officers. So when the budget debate comes on and when the budget address is made, you don't hear from the Minister of Finance that the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Education, who would receive an allocation of $20 million, and this is how they spent it. Now, wait. Okay, so then there is another flaw. They are not amenable to the Public Accounts Committee, an oversight body of Parliament. So when you're talking about due diligence, you have a body of people in the leadership of government, in the executive, and in the public service who are not accountable to Parliament. That the parliamentarians on the government side can support legislation to benefit one person. The IPO, the IPO Act is one such beneficiary that came from Parliament. That when you can do that brazenly, then you're talking about due diligence. Of course, there is diligence in how well I look after myself and my friends and my enablers.
Yeah.
But not due diligence in adhering to the precepts of the preamble in the Constitution. That is where the authority, the moral authority for governance comes from. Not in the section that says there shall be a prime minister. When the prime minister is appointed, he must be issued with a copy, a one-pager that holds the preamble to the Constitution. And this is where we have our difficulty. So the Public Accounts Committee, the Oversight Committee, Parliamentary Committee doesn't have the power to question why is it $7.9 billion is missing. And nobody, it has gotten so bad that it is now imputing improper motive if you call the name Anthony Hayden in our Parliament.
Yeah.
Anthony Hayden, who was in Dominica a year ago or 2 years ago, and signed an agreement at the Windsor Park.
2 years ago, I think August 2021.
I think it was either May or around May.
Yeah.
All right? Signed an agreement with the government of Dominica. What is the dice house? What do you call it? The house of darkness?
Darkness.
Right.
Everybody sees, nobody knows.
Right. When the reporter asked, is the building a government, a public or private initiative? We heard what the Prime Minister's answer was. In the case of Anthony Hayden, It was a public initiative, a government initiative to give a contract to someone to be the developer of our international airport. And a parliamentarian goes to parliament and is sanctioned by the speaker that you cannot call the name of the developer in parliament. Where can you call that person's name? You cannot ask of the Minister of Finance, have you tabled, are you going to table, or when are you going to table the agreement you signed? A permanent secretary representing the government signed on behalf of the government with Anthony Hayden in Dominica. It's not laid in parliament.
Missy Henderson signed with Anthony Hayden.
Then Anthony Hayden, with his company, goes and subcontracts somebody
in Dubai
to be the constructor of the airport.
Yeah.
And no Dominican of Kalinago or Afro descent was present. I don't want to say no Dominican was there. I figure everybody that was around that table may be a Dominican. But no Dominican that we really can identify with, if we are truly Dominicans, was present. And these agreements are not laid in Parliament. An agreement that the Prime Minister said that will cost Dominica $1.3 billion does not find itself in the halls of Parliament. It is not tabled there for discuss and debate. Then how do you expect somebody who is so blatant in disregarding the rule of law in a country is going to concern himself with due diligence when no power in Dominica can get him to account properly for what transpires?
You're listening to The Workers' Voice. In studios with me, Mr. Nicholas George, our General Secretary. And we're discussing right now the CBI, revenue from the CBI, and the amount we have in an update that was compiled by the president of the United Workers' Party, Mr. Lennox Linton. And just in summary, for the past 7 years, the sale of CBI passports have yielded $4.7 billion. We have sold 46,615 passports for the past 7 years, yielded $10.7 billion, and only $2.1 billion have entered Dominica. $7.9 billion is somewhere on the outside. Just to give you an idea, 46,615 new citizens of Dominica in the past 7 years. In the past 7 years is 72% of our population, which is 65,000.
How long did it take us to get to 72,000?
62,000.
No, how long did it take us to populate this island to the number 72,000?
Since they started doing population.
Since they say Columbus passed there.
Right, and we had Kalinagos here. So that's where we are. It's a very serious situation we are faced with. And as responsible citizens, Dominicans, Mr. George, I heard you made you spoke of the Constitution so eloquently, and there are a lot of people listening to us right now, and they say, "But what are we going to do about that money when we have our infrastructure falling apart, our hospital, healthcare is falling apart? We don't have rural economies, agriculture has fallen apart, all the productive sectors." And today, if you listen to the Prime Minister recorded and wasted, I wasted my time listening to it, making mention about lengthening the Melville Airport runway, and also his airport coming. Nothing about what are we going to do about the productive sector. and even talking about the free movement of people in the Caribbean. And we're not talking about the free movement of people in the Caribbean. We're talking about being able to go to England, to the UK without a visa. We are a lot of us have aunties and uncles and fourth generation cousins out there in the UK because we were part of the Windruff generation who moved to England in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
But not only
And
that, not only we think we were once British. Britain
yes.
owned Dominica.
In 1970,
They did not. We never really got to the point where we were British citizens. Which is now here's the thing about that. In our constitution and other laws, immigration and so on, any person who was a British person in Dominica at the coming into force of our constitution automatically became a Dominican. But to this day, you talk about the Windrush, to this day we are struggling to be British, even if we have been in Britain for 60 years, 70 years. But they ensured that when they were negotiating our constitution, that any British citizen that was on Dominica cannot be deported or sent out of the country because the constitution recognized that that person is Dominican. They got nationality because they were from Ireland, Scotland, and England, the Isles. But it did not reciprocate for us. Okay, so I had a British passport, the black one. But I wasn't British. I was very much Dominican. I'm very proud to be a Dominican. I'm just saying it's the irony. And then we've extended. So you are right on this question of due diligence, right? But I am going back a bit deliberately because a lot of people are not diligent in the discharge of their functions in Dominica. So therefore, they cannot understand due when it hardly dues in Dominica, and so you get rain and you get a flood. And diligent,
you go to Bells to get some dew.
You have to go to Bacassi to get some dew. Not many of them go there. All of them are in the environs of Roseau, the leaders. So that is where we have our problem. And here's another one. If you can go to Parliament and pass law to benefit an individual, that tells you about due diligence. And accountability. And this is an area I want to speak on. The question of accountability. The permanent secretaries are not held accountable to the people through Parliament. So that's a big flaw there, and it contravenes the principles of the Constitution. That it respecting the principles of social justice and therefore believe that the operation of the economic system should result in so distributing the material resources of the community as to subserve the common good. So permanent secretaries sit at their offices and they administer archaic laws, the Pusinelli report of 1970, and say a civil servant shall not be appointed and so on, and they keep people 7 years, 10 years as substitutes with degrees.
Yeah, with degrees.
Master degrees. The very qualification that they need to be permanent secretaries are held by the people that they have. And something doesn't hurt their conscience that one day you got a chance. Some permanent secretary recommended you to come up the ladder.
Yeah.
And now, because of some colorization, you can't see that this person who has come from the university with 2 degrees, a BSc and a master's, should be promoted.
Yeah.
You recommend people that are not qualified to hold the positions, and they must come to the qualified now, who is the substitute, to get the advice or the direction of what to do. That, for me, there should be a criminalization of that action by the permanent secretaries, or there should be serious administrative sanctions against permanent secretaries that indulge in that. The same thing should go to the politicians, the parliamentarians, where you deliberately deny people access to the common good so that they have adequate means of livelihood and that their labor should not be exploited or forced by economic necessity. You just mentioned the small business people who are crying. They're crying because $7.9 billion belonging to them is being held by somebody outside of Dominica, and the permanent secretaries and the executive of Dominica does not care one damn. They don't care, to just confine themselves with the principles espoused in the preamble to the Constitution. If only they would do this and really practice their Christianity in Dominica, the Prime Minister would not have to be talking about due diligence. But he didn't, huh? Yeah. He didn't. And then, so I do not know if Beauty Wise has increased. Who imports the eyelashes? Beauty Wise?
Yeah, Beauty Wise on the other side. You're listening to the Workers' Voice. You're going to open the lines. People are asking to open the lines. 4493095, 4493096, 4493097, 305-432-9624. In studios with me is Mr. Nicholas George, our General Secretary, and we're discussing the update we have on the missing billions. You can also WhatsApp us at 265-4334. We are also on Q95 FM radio. You can also comment in this on Facebook. You can also comment there as well. Let me say good evening to my good friend in Mao. I doesn't remember her name, I cannot remember her name, but last week Wednesday, her son died at the hospital, a 6-month-old son. The son was got 6 on Sunday. So I just want to extend sympathies to her in my house. She always teases me when she meets me on the road. She's a cool young lady. I just want to say good evening to you and sympathies to you and your family. Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice. I missed this one. Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice. Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
I say praises, thanks, blessings, and glory to all those who sacrifice their personal safety and security, trying to elevate mankind to humanity. Mr. John and Mr. Nicholas, Mr. George.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Sorry this afternoon, but after we pass, I realized it was you sitting by the road.
Oh, okay. on the main road.
Yes.
Okay, the listening public. Blessings to you all. Let me give thanks to the resistance, what they call the opposition. Because the effort is endless. The sacrifice, whoa, let's not talk about it. We are observing what is happening. I listened to Mr. Linton this afternoon, and I listened to the replay there of what was said. And I always say to myself, these guys just jump up in the parliament. The Speaker of the House and those others that have his remote, he's just an appliance, and they have his remote, and they just say, oh, you're imputing improper motive. Out of place. I mean, if you notice, all you do, I said that, you check impute, and you will see how out of place they are, trying to disrupt and disturb the flow of revealing the nastiness in Parliament. Right in Parliament, the nastiness is being revealed. It is being exposed by a man that is quite knowledgeable and articulate and can really take them to task. And none of them, even in his rebuttal, you hear them with all their foolishness, referring to Mr. Linton, a gentleman. In all the stupidness, none of them cannot come and say something contrary to what that was being said, something different, and it hold any substance, any validity to, to just mark off or write off what Mr. Linton said. Not on the radio programs, it's just make way they come showing on the radio, not in Parliament. So in closing, you have a man that could not buy a bicycle. Not like man like Sparks that work in farming and work deep. You work deep and say, you know my partner?
Yeah, 16 years.
boy, I know that. I can remember, a hard-working young man and, and thing. A man that could not buy a bicycle become prime minister. And all of a sudden, billions of dollars is missing, unaccounted for. Then they realize he's the star boy of stupidity, the world con artist. All of them start coming, the Anthony and another one called Hayden, and even, what is his name? Bill Clinton Foundation come because disaster. The fool does not realize he was just being flisted. And the other one, Donald Trump come with the Chinese man, with the cryptocurrency. How much that go? How much did he invest? Because he's trying to evade justice and he do not want the truth to reveal. So every big con artist, well experienced, there's a little idiot in Dominica they call chupul chichi bullshit. Let us go and give Mr. Two slaps behind his head, and as he turns, you take that. As he turns back, you take that. And they rob the fool blind. Then he come to Dominica, cursing people. Oh, bullshit. How dare you ask me that question? And you working in GBS. And he ready to give because he realizes he's just a fool on a global stage with sophisticated people. No wonder he gonna buy a doctorate. He buying doctorate like that is of any significance. The man in Trinidad make a jack of himself. You listen to how that boy take him and spin him around and blows on him. Anyway, thanks, gentlemen. It's just we the students that are hard to learn. But I believe the teachers are doing a perfect work. Blessings.
Thank you very much, Truly appreciate that. Truly appreciate your contribution. Good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Yes. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, Honorable Staggs. I know there, and good evening to you, Mr. George, Honorable.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, there's something people say sometimes, there's enough food on the table so that we can chew and we can eat and digest, relax and then contribute. So I suspect enough food is being laid on the table right now. So, people will have their say in terms of what you have exposed. And so let me say truth revealed once more. And the usual suspects will always come with an attitude about, the figures are incorrect. And you know how they are. They can only say the figures are incorrect, but they cannot correct it. So many years ago, we heard the Prime Minister talk about correcting figures from St. Joseph. And when the figures come out that it will embarrass a certain individual, not only just a certain individual, it will embarrass the same Honorable Lennox Linton. But the same Honorable Lennox Linton again, that is declaring now to us and to let us see with our eyes, who have eyes, let them see, that exposure, that financial exposure there right now on that CBI is a disgrace, and we need answers to that. But interestingly, remember, I want two quick points, Remember in the Parliament that the Prime Minister stood up in Parliament, and Mr. Lennox Linton ruffled feathers again in the Parliament. And he said, all those, if anybody try to mess with that CBI, they will be dealt with in the swiftest possible manner, or in the swiftest possible manner. I don't know what that means, but to me, you would want to go out of your way to handle people and to discipline them should they speak against the CBI. But it is usual that this government, they are the ones who dirty Dominica's name, put dirty laundry outside. And when one merely repeats what they do, they say, we put Dominica's dirty linen outside. But what? Now that the British Parliament has now interfered with the CBI, because that is direct interference now with Dominica's CBI program, selling of passport program, is the Prime Minister willing to stand by his statement that the British government will be dealt with in the swiftest possible manner? And by the way, was he talking to them at the time when he was in the Parliament? Well, Mr. Prime Minister, you get your match now. Go now and deal with the British people or the British Parliament at the head of the British society. Go now and ruffle feathers now. Go and handle them now. And number two, we often hear them boast about Dominica's performance with respect to the CBI. And they always come not first. Let me remind Dominicans where they coming out first and in what they coming out first. Well, we have heard of CS Global Partners. And by the way, CS Global Partners, they are a consulting firm and they are specialists in terms of CBI, Citizenship by Investment Program. And what they do, what they say they do based on their website is that they help government unlock certain economic opportunities by protecting and promoting citizenship by investment. So what is it that CS Global Partners, what is it that they are not telling the government that the government finds itself in that kind of problem? And by the way, when you talk about the government coming out first, but remember they do the CBI index on 9 pillars, 2 of which I will just mention quickly, and you mentioned one already, talk about due diligence, but they also talk about the ease of processing. But there's a conflict, with ease of processing and due diligence. Because we're talking about ease of processing, which means that you will not have time to do detailed due diligence. You're more interested in that pillar, which is the ease of processing. Really, get it fast and let's go. And that is why now they have found themselves in trouble, because the due diligence aspect, they don't have time to waste because it's money they want. So they are going on the ease of processing. So actually, Dominica's process is easier now to get a citizenship by investment in Dominica's case faster than any of their countries. So therefore, they always top in that until they become number 1 based on the index. And so Dominicans, we have had enough of that. Enough of the exposure. We know now $10 billion now were generated from the CBI over a 6-year period, 7-year period. And we know now it's only 2 point something came into the treasury. Dominicans, you expect Spags in the studio to fight for you? You expect Lennox, who made the disclosure, to fight for you? You expect our honorable leader of our party, Honorable Dr. Thompson, to fight for you? Dominicans, all of that is impacting on you, the negatives of that. You are not able to get jobs. And what is hurting with that? If all of these monies had come in and Dominicans were empowered, you know what it would have been? What kind of great Dominica it would have been? Brothers and sisters, my friends, you are doing a great job. Sorry I go overboard, but allow people to call and put wood in that fire. Because it's time Dominicans wake up to mind their own business and stop minding minuscule things like Mr. Lennox. Mr. Lennox is not the problem. He has dealt with the issue, he's educated us, and now is your time now to act. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for calling in. Friday is Cassava Pizza Day. Check out the Cassava Man in front of HHV Church. I just put in a vlog in there for my good friend, the Cassava Man. Friday is Cassava Pizza Day. Check him out in front of HHV Church in downtown Roseau. Mr. George, you heard the call, and you hear this type of sentiments being expressed. We have another area to touch. We had to play something to do with reform. But as we begin to get that information out there to the people, I think I am one of them that really not one of the talking. Some people I see myself as a rebel, and a rebel for the country. And for the past 23 years and more, United Workers' Party has been very consistent in terms of bringing the information to the public. People were saying we wasted too much money on courts, on court matters. And what you're hearing right now, everybody's speaking about reform, electoral reform, and everything else. They speak to the judgment given by the CCJ saying that our election was tainted. It's because of the United Workers' Party we got there. And that is what people have to begin to. We have been playing our role. No, we wanted to get on board. There should be no parliament on the 25th. Until Roosevelt Skerritt tells us where that $7.9 million billion
he have hiding. I know it's difficult to say billion
because it's something you're trying to. How about somebody can take $7.9 billion of a country, have it in his back pocket or in his friend's back pocket, and you have people dying of hunger, people dying because they cannot get medication in the hospital. People have to buy Scotch tape to use as band-aid in the hospital. They cannot get IV catheter in the hospital to give to do blood transfusion and whatnot. If somebody need to get some or the life water we call it, yeah, in the hospital. That is what we are faced with. Our children, our teachers have to carry school supplies, teaching supplies to school, because the government will not supply or will not give them. Some of the secondary schools do not get something. They give them a box of chalk and something else, and that's it for the semester, for the entire school year. And the teachers have to go at their home and buy stuff to bring to school. We're seeing that happening. We are hearing that over and over. Our farmers have been neglected, and non-farmers getting our greenhouses. Ask Reginald Austria how many greenhouses he got from the Koreans that was sent after the hurricane. How many of them he has set up in Cottage or a place they call in his area Lemitai? That is what we need to challenge, and we have to challenge Roosevelt's carrot right now, and it's this government that $77.9 billion. I wanted to ring in everybody's head tonight. We have to force Kerry to leave office. He cannot sit down there and say, let things go on. No, we cannot do that anymore. And we want you out there to begin to stand up. We want you out there to begin to speak. We want you out there to join the movement to remove this rogue regime led by Roosevelt Skerrit. Let me take this last call, and we will have to go to the next. Mr. George, you had something to say?
No, go ahead.
The calls. Yes, Mr. George.
Yeah.
I had to bring that out because we have to put sanctions on Skerrit. You see how the British was swift. That's what we're going to do. Let me just say. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Workers' Voice.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sprague. You're on the road. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, sir.
Not to mention students in these hot classrooms, schools, no running water. Could go on and on. Come on, Dominicans, wake up. Wake up. Thank you.
Very much for your short and sweet intervention. And we know what the situation is. You know, you walk into Roseau yesterday. Yesterday I was in Roseau. One of these days, yeah, walking into Roseau, and the trains actually stinking with stagnant water and food mixed. You know, so you had that stench. I remember a young boy coming to Roseau in the 80s and 90s, and they would flush the drains every midnight. The city council would ensure that you had the fire hydrant in every corner. Right now, you're walking into town and you have a city council, and the drains are stinking. And that is Roseau we're saying we're going to make the envy of the Caribbean, Mr. George.
No, you see, somebody alluded to it a while ago. What the Labour Party has done, and what plenty others have done, is to take the advocacy of the United Workers' Party for granted.
Yeah.
And therefore, they have built a hatred in the country.
Yeah.
So, and they have built hatred for the Honorable Lennox Linton. And Lennox Linton is a blessed man. Lennox Linton is a great man. Lennox Linton compares with Nelson Mandela for his fortitude, his graciousness, his intellect, and his commitment and love for country. And the more he exposes these virtues and he puts himself on the line, the more the Labour Party create hatred for him. But I'm confident, that we will overcome. Yeah. We shall overcome. Mr. Linton said in the studios there if you have not lost the will, I have not lost the will as well. I know you'd say that you are a rebel. I'm not sure that you are more rebellious than me. I'm not sure. It is just that I have a different approach.
Right.
And my approach is one where I want to make sure that you are educated.
Yep.
I want to make sure that you understand what it is I am saying.
Yep.
And tonight you will hear me go back almost ad infinitum on the permanent secretaries.
Yeah.
And the executive, that's the cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand
Their
rules in governance. They must rule through wickedness and vindictiveness. And they believe when they do that, they have done their duty. And one of the reasons why they do this is because there is no legal sanction. There's no administrative sanction against that can be taken against a parliamentarian, apart from the abuse by the speaker in the House against parliamentarians. So there's no sanction. So if I do not follow the public service, just that, the public service regulations on promotion, there is no administrative sanction against me. If I deny people their just rights, as the Constitution says, there is no legal sanction that comes against me. And therefore, we believe that when we become permanent secretaries and we are parliamentary representatives, we can do what we want and we become the law. And where the law is not in our favor, we go to parliament, we can go to parliament and change the law to our favor. And that is what is happening in Dominica. It's happened for too long. And people, I am, like Mr. John, I am appealing to you all to give the United Workers' Party a break.
Yeah.
On the 31st of May this year, the United Workers' Party held a mass rally, educated the public, and called for the presentation of the Byron report in June. And all of a sudden, the Byron report emerged. The party called for consultation in July. And we are observing that there will be no call from the government for a national consultation. So it suggests to me that the government, the executive, has already decided that they will go on a collision course, because yet again, the government believes and verily believes that it has enough forces to suppress the people, and they have the backing of CARICOM leaders. Mr. Prime Minister, you should not be thinking of your people that way. If you have 7.9 billion that is not accounted in Dominica, is not accounted for in Dominica and in our treasury, then you can win any election. If it is you who has it, if it is not you, those who have it, let them bring it to our shores. We need it. We need it to develop our country. Don't wait when something goes wrong and some sanction is put on by some foreign government, and then this money is tied up in litigation in some jurisdiction outside of ours, and we have absolutely no access to it. Then you want to call on us to help. It will be too late. Prime Minister, the collision course that you're seemingly setting Dominica on is not good, it's not Christian, it is not healthy. I am appealing to you to change course. Stop on the trajectory that you're going. Stop on the direction that you're heading and begin to turn about and understand that you have been privileged to be the Prime Minister of Dominica. And that privilege is not one that you should abuse. You are abusing the privilege of being Prime Minister of Dominica, and you need to stop it. You need to respect the people who voted you. You need to respect the people who confer upon you the title of honorable. And you need to discharge your functions in such a manner that we don't have to just call you honorable in Parliament, but we must feel the honor coming from your personage. Stop what you're doing, because what you are doing will lead to anarchy in this country, and we don't need that.
Thank you very much, Mr. George. You're listening to the Workers' Voice. In studios with me is Mr. Nicholas George, our General Secretary from Colhill, and we're discussing electoral reform. We're discussing the CBI new figures. As we're saying, there are 46,615 individuals who got citizenship from Dominica in 7 years. That took us to $10 billion. We have only received 2.1 in the country, and 7.9 billion is out of state. We just want you to keep that in your head, and we want you to discuss it. Just think of what $7.9 billion can do for Dominica, can do for your family, can do for the betterment of the economy. We are hearing that they might increase VAT to 17.5%. Coming this budget cycle. I don't believe there should be another parliament until Roosevelt Skerrit demits office, resigns from office, or he's forced out of office. That's what I believe. But we'll make me shifting gear right now, and to play an excerpt that will take us to 10. It's about 19 minutes, and then we will also do a discussion on it, Mr. George, and then we'll leave about 10. All right, so let's listen to this one put together by Mr. Lennox Linton, our president.
I like what Justice Andre has been able to do in terms of summarizing what I think is the mind of the nation, coming from all of those civil society organizations, those individuals and groups that presented themselves to the consultant during the consultation, and all of the recommendations that came through the years from the various observer missions and so on, that we in Dominica agree to, like ID cards for voting, like cleaning up the voters register, which going back to 2008 emerges two reforms that the Electoral Commission itself committed itself to doing for the people of Dominica. And that summary of Dr. Andre, in my view, is a very good document, is a very good place to focus all our attention so that we have, over the next few weeks, a set of proposals that we all agree on, that we, the people of Dominica, agree on. We, the people of Dominica, represented by our political parties, represented by our civil society organizations, represented by our individuals and intellectuals or academic community, we, the people of Dominica, agree on. And we, the people, have paid for the Dennis Byron consultancy. It was the Prime Minister who suggested that the fee should be $450,000 and the additional $200,000 for the legal draftsmanship work that was done. But we have paid $650,000. We, the people, not Roosevelt Skerrit, not the members of his cabinet. The people of Dominica have paid that amount of money. And for that money, the people have a report. The people have recommendations. The people have proposals for revising the electoral laws in Dominica, specifically the Registration of Electors Act, the Registration of Electors Regulations, the House of Assembly Elections Act, the House of Assembly Elections Regulations. So those 4 pieces of legislation. And the question is, what do we do with what we have? If those bills, as proposed, go before the parliament and are passed, we are not going to have the reform that we have been talking about, that we have been looking forward to, in order to make our electoral process fit for the purpose of free and fair elections. That's not going to happen. And so there are specific changes that need to be made to these bills as proposed to allow us to have revised electoral legislation that will give effect to proper reform of the electoral process. So in the Registration of Electors Act, for example, number 1, our electoral process in Dominica must provide for a total re-registration of voters and provisions for cleansing of the voters list on an annual basis. That is something that has to be worked into the legislation. It is not there right now, but that can be done. Number 2, those persons who are ordinarily resident in Dominica, and only those persons who are ordinarily resident in Dominica, and those who are no longer ordinarily resident in Dominica for less than 5 years should be eligible to vote in elections in Dominica. If you're ordinary resident outside of Dominica for more than 5 years, then your name should be taken off the register. The provisions for that to happen can be made, and the proposals we have before us fixed to allow that to happen. Number 4, no overseas registration of voters, no overseas confirmation of registration of voters. All we need to do is to pull out those provisions in the proposed new legislation that provides for that. And 4, in terms of the Registration of Electors Act, there has to be specific voter identification card, not a national identification card, because the consultant himself has agreed that to make the Electoral Commission responsible for the issuance and management of a national identification card would be inconsistent with the constitutional authority given to the Electoral Commission. So it's a voter ID card we're looking for, issued to all eligible voters in Dominica with biometric data that includes facial recognition and fingerprinting. There's a lot of talk about biometrics in the report of the consultant and in the proposed legislation, but nowhere in the proposed legislation is it specifically required. Is there a specific requirement for what should be on the voter identification card? There's no provision for the inclusion of biometric data. There is no provision for the inclusion of a unique identification number, the voter registration number. There is no provision for the address of the voter. There's no provision for the polling district in which the voter is registered. All of those need to be specifically provided for in the legislation. And those are fixes. We don't have to toss the legislation because of that. We can make these changes. The question is whether we're going to find the political will in the political directorate that was going to use its majority vote in Parliament to get what it wants. In terms of the House of Assembly Elections Act, the changes there must allow for political parties, all political parties, to have access to both state and privately owned media in Dominica during an election period. If you have any issues with that, we can see what is provided for in the Antigua legislation, the Representation of the People's Act, where all political parties have access to all media, not just state media, and there's specific penalties for non-compliance. Number 2, fixed limits on campaign spending. We have suggested a maximum spending of no more than $50 per registered voter in expenditure both before and during any reporting period stipulated in the applicable legislation. That again is an easy fix for some legal draftsperson to take what has been presented by Mr. Byron and which belongs to us, the people right now, and make the adjustment. We talk of foreign persons, companies, government, citizenship, sales agents, holders of government contracts, financed by citizenship revenues, expressly prohibited from contributing either directly or indirectly to any candidate or any party during election. Conversely, we could take those citizenship agents and persons with contracts financed by citizenship revenues and mandate them to make equal contributions to all parties. In either case, we balance the scales. We get rid of the unfair influence of our money, the money belonging to the people of Dominica, going to finance a particular political party, as opposed to all political parties. There should be fixed limits on the amount of money that a Dominican or local company can contribute to the election campaign of any candidate or political party. That can be properly, easily provided for by appropriate changes to the wording of the proposals that Mr. Byron has delivered. Number 5, the definition of bribery. We've said over and over again, we believe it must reflect the guidance of Halsbury's Laws of England, the 4th edition, volume 15, paragraph 770, page 421, that, quote, the payment or promise of payment to a voter of his traveling expenses on the condition expressed or implied that he would vote for a particular candidate is bribery. One of the biggest taints on the electoral process in Dominica is this bribery and treating that goes on and has hit steroids in the past couple of elections, to the point where we're basically in a situation where our elections are just being bought out. Now, remember, we had an election in 2022, a sham election, called in the month of December. In 2019, we had an election in the month of December, and we said we didn't have an international airport in Dominica, but Melville Hall was transformed into an international airport with a number of aircraft that were on the ground over a 2 to 3 day period in Dominica, transporting people to come into Dominica to vote today and leave tomorrow. That was in 2019. In 2022, we had another election, but in this election, the United Workers' Party was not participating. We boycotted the election. So there was no need for the Labour Party or Roosevelt Skerrit or the New Skerrit Family Party to bring in anybody to vote. So Melville Hall was quiet. Nobody was coming in to vote. And I'm making an observation to go back to all of the people who are out there claiming that this right they have, that somebody wants to take away from them. Is it a right that you exercise of your own free will and using your own resources? Or is it a right that is being exercised by persons who are accepting bribes to come to corrupt the electoral process in Dominica? I want to ask the question, if you're not ordinarily resident somewhere in Dominica, and elections in Dominica are about choosing representatives for particular areas of Dominica. If you're not living in Dominica, when you vote in Dominica, you come from the United States, or you come from Canada, or you come from Antigua, or you come from Guadeloupe or Martinique or France or Canada to vote, which representative are you voting for? The representative you're voting for does not represent you, cannot represent you. The government that will get in office as a result of the election, you're not under the jurisdiction of that government. Whatever they do has no impact on you where you ordinarily reside overseas. Why do you want to be involved in voting in an election in Dominica where you do not live and where the government's action has no impact at all on you because you're in another jurisdiction under the governance of another group of people? There are a number of Dominicans living overseas who do not want to vote in Dominica, who do not believe that they should be voting in Dominica simply because they respect the people of Dominica, they respect their brothers and sisters in Dominica enough to give them the privilege, the responsibility of voting a government of their choice, of voting representatives of their choice. And so this matter of the residence, which is a provision in the Constitution, the residence qualification, ordinarily resident, and place of ordinary residence is not a Dominican invention. It's around the world, known to people who've taken the electoral process seriously, and persons who want to protect the integrity of the vote of the people in a democratic setting. We also have this matter of the breach of electoral laws, which need to be punished not only by fine and imprisonment, but also by disqualification. It is easy to make sure that happens in specific provisions in the law. And then where people have a conflict of interest that arises, for example, from the sale of passports or for providing professional services to the government for consideration other than their work as a member of the commission, they should be disqualified. We should be able to do that easily. The law can provide for that. I don't think we need a constitutional amendment for that to happen. And then my position is that these changes can be made in order to make the legislation friendly to the whole idea of proper reforms. Make the legislation deliver proper reform of the process, and make the process through those reforms that we will put in legislation fit for the purpose of free and fair elections of integrity. There's where I think we need to go. And the sooner that Dominica can agree on all of the changes that need to be made to what Mr. Byron has proposed, the better it's going to be for all of us. Now, we have taken the civil approach to finding solutions to this long-standing, very vexing problem of the right of the people of Dominica to free and fair elections being taken away from them. This matter, if it is not resolved, we have been warned by the Caribbean Court of Justice, our apex court. We have been warned that this persistent denial of the right to free and fair elections leads to unrest. It leads to demonstrations. It leads to protest action. It leads to revolt. That admonition is in the judgment, 2022 July judgment of the Caribbean Court of Justice. So it is not Lennox Linton sounding as though he is fomenting strife or problem. It's just that this unrelenting attack on the people's right to free and fair elections cannot be sustained. It's not sustainable. And so as we listen to the conversations of the people who are insisting and are digging their heels in talking about disenfranchising people, where we're talking about the constitutional qualification for residents, and talking about almost as though they want protection in the law for them to continue to use corruption and manipulation of the process to continue to steal elections in Dominica. And expect that we will hear a lot about this legal luminary, Dennis Byron, who gave the report. And we're going to be asked to behave as though we were handed a Bible on reform that we should accept and implement without question. We are not going to do that simply because we know now, having read the report, that it is not going to deliver what the people want in terms of making our process fit for the purpose of free and fair elections. We can fix it for that to happen, and we will put the specific recommendations before the government. My final thoughts go back to the admonition of the Caribbean Court of Justice. July 2022. Without free and fair elections, the preambular value of the creation and maintenance and respect for lawfully constituted authority would be fatally undermined. The consequences of such a denial that a reflection on Caribbean history demonstrates include loss of legitimacy, public unrest, and even revolt. In contemporary terms, Free and fair elections are so fundamental to the democratic way of life that without it, the very legitimacy and sovereignty of the constitutional state is brought into question, constituted as is by the people of Dominica. In this regard, it is worth reminding ourselves the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority, the legitimacy of government. End of quote. And I quote the Apex Court to say that we are at a very important phase in our march to secure democracy against the onslaught of dictatorship in this country. We have come this far. We have work still to be done. And the critical thing now is whether those who are in office are going to allow the people's reforms to take effect so that the process is fixed and made fit for purpose, or whether they're going to arrogantly, dictatorially, oppressively continue to deny the people of this country the right to free and fair elections. They're going to continue to do that. They're going to continue to uphold their illegitimacy. Then, as the CCJ has warned us, there will be public unrest and even revolt in Dominica. That's not what we want. We believe there is a civil solution ahead of us, which involves taking on board the recommendations now for amending the proposals for revising our electoral laws that will give true effect to real reform of the process. That's available to us right now, and we can take it, or we can refuse it and deny the people the right to free and fair elections, which will lead to very unpleasant results.
Yes, Mr. George, and I am sure the listening public have heard us right here on Q95, Mr. Linton. The way forward, electoral reform, a lot of rehashing, but just put into perspective some of the things that we have been saying for years on about electoral reform. Your take, we don't have much time, but what is your take on what was said?
I agree entirely with what was presented by the president of the United Workers' Party, Honorable Lennox Linton. What I find lacking in the presentations from Sir Dennis Byron are confidence-building measures in the legislation. I have gone through the report, and I will go through it again so I can internalize what is written there. There are offenses that people can be charged for if they do certain things. But there are no offenses that sanctions the actions of the commission or officers appointed by the commission, the chief elections officers down. Because of that lack, there is also a lack of trust. So what is recommended in Sir Dennis's report could be all right if only we could trust the people who would be implementing and administering law. But 23 years of governance by this ruling regime has taught us that we cannot trust the executive. We cannot trust the Electoral Commission. We cannot trust the administration. I know personally that we wrote the chairman of the commission, that is the ERC, we wrote. And the chairman didn't think that the letter deserved a response. Now, the ERC is comprised of a number of groups and individuals. They're citizens of Dominica. So a citizen writing to the chairman and he thinks that is beneath me. We've not heard the chairman speak on the issue of electoral reform, the manner that he should do it.
Is there a chairman?
Yes, there is a chairman.
Is Duncan still on island?
I do not know if he's on island, but I'm saying the law says there shall be a chairman of the commission. So if there isn't a chairman, then it's dysfunctional. But you see, I contested 2 elections, and particularly in the 2019 elections, we went over the electors list that was given to us. And we identified a number of people who were out of state for years,
Yep.
and who were dead, had been dead for many years. And that could be verified by the records in the registry. And we submitted that to the Electoral Commission. I have a stamped copy. When I delivered it, the document myself, the commission, the attendant there stamped my copy to certify that I, in fact, delivered something. To this day, I have gotten absolutely no information, no letter that says what was done with the list I submitted. And therefore, I cannot trust the officials to whom these lists were submitted.
Mr. George, in 2014, I think some of us did that exercise, but that exercise was done extensively by the Cassibus constituency. And they presented that to the Electoral Commission, the Electoral Office. The copy was stamped, and they got nothing. In 2019, we did that in South where every constituency had to do something about what, but we got some dead people who were on the list, and we submitted it, and nothing was done. It came back on the list. You know, it goes back to what we are saying. We have been seeing from 2005, when we had our first electoral reform rally on the Newton Savannah, talking about cleaning the list, voter ID cards, access to the national radio stations, and also campaign finance reform. And we have been consistent for the past 18 years, and nothing has been done. So we're hoping, not that we're hoping, but something has to give. Something must give.
I know something has to give, and I know we are at the crossroads, and I believe we will get something. I'm a retired police officer, and from a tenure in the police force, I was governed by the Police Act and the police regulations. Both of them contain legal sanctions for actions. And they could either be disciplinary or criminal. In the Police Act and the police regulations, action could be taken against me.
Mr. George, I worked in the banana industry for 16 years, and they had the do's and don'ts at the industry, and it could be fired. You know that comes with every institution.
Right. But what you see what I'm trying to get at.
Yes.
This thing is so, this electoral reform process is so important.
Yeah.
And it impacts on governance to the point where $7.9 billion cannot be left overseas, because it starts with the work of the commission. So if the commission, the commissioners, the chairman, and the chief elections officers do not perform their duties properly, or they perform them prejudicially to favor one party or another, or particularly the party in power, then that neglect ought to be sanctioned. Another area that I've seen in the deficient in the law is that you appeal, you apply for registration, and that may be denied for whatever. Then you get your appeal to the chief elections officer, chief registering officer, and if that is denied, it goes to the commission. And it appears that it ends there. Your right to be an elector is a right. You have a right given to you in the Constitution. And therefore, the law is deficient right there. That the appeal process must go all the way to the CCJ. It cannot stop with the commission, ought not to stop with the commission. So there are areas, Mr. Honorable Linton articulated them, and I'm not going to go over them. I'm just saying, in my view, that part of two areas, as far as the Electors Act is concerned, Registration of Electors Act is concerned, there must be in that law sanctions against registering officers, returning officers. In other words, there have to be established offenses that if they commit, that these sanctions can be taken against them. We read in the CCJ's report that there were a number, they didn't just say that this thing was tainted, you know, there were a number of irregularities practiced by officials of the commission, and no action was taken against them. None whatsoever. The commission itself, the way it is constituted, favors a political party. So there is not justice dispensed from that office. So in the body of law, there has to be that. And as far as the House of Assembly Act is concerned, the corruption that we're talking about there, the $10 billion that was accruing to Dominica and 7.9 missing. Parliament must have, so in other words, the corruption does not, because you pass two bits of legislation, the House of Assembly Act and the Electors Act, Registration of Electors Act, then you have electoral reform. No. It must go further than that. The reform must go in the halls of Parliament, right in the chamber of Parliament. And there has to be an oversight body that allows for investigations of allegations and the requirement for people to account to Parliament. Failure to do so, legal sanctions.
Mr. George, and that is where I was earlier on when I made reference to working in the industry, that you have, as I said, agreement and regulations that you have to follow. I was saying that it starts in the small institution, that you have a bit, even at home, as a parent, you have the do's and don'ts you don't want your children to do. And sometimes your children maybe will put you straight to if you do something that is out of line. That is part of the process. So if you can look at it from the household and take it all in, nobody's above the law, nobody's above the law within the home setting, but I should respect mommy and daddy. But mommy and daddy should not set the boundary and abuse me. That is what I was looking about. I was part of the revised constitution of the National Youth Council, the National Youth Policy. We spent nights and days, and Ed Regis and Steve Joseph and all the others camping around Dominica, putting those things together in the 90s. You have it now. Is it being? Are they being respected? Are the new crops of vanguards of our youth policy and youth constitution, are they doing their job? And it goes back to what are we doing at the top as lawmakers, as the leaders. And earlier on, you made a very important point about the permanent secretaries, and they have a role to play in that as well. And all that falls under having a very strong democratic process with all the laws, but are we abiding by those laws? And you made mention of the PSs, and before we take a few calls on and we'll log down by 10:20, somebody was asking who are the permanent secretaries in the different ministries. You do not know, a lot of people don't know them. So agriculture and blue economy is Reggie Severin. Culture, youth, sports, community development, you have Lucian Blackmore. Education was Chandler High since she retired. I don't know who is acting areas yet. Finance, you have the FS, Dennis Edwards. Foreign affairs, Barbara Daly. Housing and urban development, Kira Paul. Investment and some other thing I missed out there. Investment, Karen Prevost. Labor, Gloria Joseph. National Security, Joanne Kamada. Public Works, that's Emil Lancelot. Tourism, you have Lisa Valmo. Under the one for Kalinago Empowerment, it couldn't open, so I could have seen who is the PS in that ministry. So people were trying to find out what the PS is in the different ministry, because you made a very important point about holding everybody accountable as senior public officers, because they have a very important role to play in these ministries and also in managing our resources. And I just wanted to bring that out there because it all falls part under having electoral reform, governance, where we are. And if we have reform, we have a strong government governing, strong opposition, strong institutions. Everybody will play their role because they know that they have to work on the law and within the law. They have to work for the people and not abusing the people or working for one set and turning the eye because of a caller. My parent send me. Nothing is can be wrong about you. You know, and these are that is what I wanted to when I brought in that point. So every institution, if you work at Archipelago or at Astafans, you have to follow the rules. But one of the big shareholders of Astafans want us to break the rule for a man to stay in government, do not want to destroy his Stephen legacy as a prime minister of Dominica. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter.
Look, there's three branches, right? The government, legislature, the judiciary, and the executive.
Yeah.
The judiciary has code of conduct.
Yeah.
So they can discipline a magistrate and a judge. The Legal Services Commission can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yep.
So how is it there is no law that says that if a permanent secretary practices nepotism, that is an offense?
Yep.
That you unequally and inequitably distribute the wealth of the nation, which is entrusted to you, that is an offense. The chief registering officer can deny you registration, and then there's one appeal process. If it's chief registration officer that does that, it goes to the commission, and that's it. Then there is a provision in sections 51 and section 50 and 51 of the Electors Act that says that the commission, and take into consideration the one constituted now, can by order in the Gazette and other means declare a particular place outside of Dominica as a place where confirmation will be done. We know what this commission has done. How can we trust?
Mm-hmm.
How can we trust the work of that commission outside of Dominica? There must be a verifying body that whatever information that comes from New York must come to a body independent of the commission to verify this. And if they find that, no, I'm serious about it. You see, when I was a police officer, I was charged disciplinarily for not going to court because I had prosecuted somebody and I'd taken them to court. So it's my duty to go to court. So therefore, it is the duty of the chief elections officer to verify that the information I brought to him from the Collier constituency saying that 18 people are on the current list who are dead to verify this. And if he fails to so verify, he should be charged and dismissed from office for neglect of duty, dereliction of duty. And it should go to the permanent secretaries for the abuses that they heap on people, abusing them. How can people be 7 years on probationary work
12.
with 2 degrees?
12 years as well.
How can people be on temporary work? How can people be on temporary work with 2 degrees?
In the public service.
And you the permanent secretary, to qualify for a permanent secretary, you must have 2. A BSc and a master's. Here you have somebody who's 20 years service, and you have them. That is an abuse of authority, and there has to be a means to do something about it. And the same thing goes for the elections. Therefore, I'm recommending the law as it is must have what I consider to be confidence-building measures because of the distrust that has been exhibited by the Commission in the years that has gone, so as to get us from where we are to where we want to be. When the law was passed in 1951, as the Attorney General said at the ceremony when they handed over the thing, we had people who understood ethics and integrity. This government has shown us that they cannot be trusted in anything.
Mr. George, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Where the general election of Dominica takes place? Where?
Dominica.
So why should there be verification of people to vote in Dominica's election overseas?
It has to be done in Dominica.
Mr. George, in 2009, 2008, I was in New York going to school, so I came to visited Dominica around the Christmas in 2007, 2008. And I was told upon my arrival that I have to renew my passport before I go back to the US, because the deadline for the new CARICOM passport was May 2008. Nobody was renewing passport overseas. Everybody had to come to Dominica to renew their passport. Vote, but you travel with a passport. Yeah. But you travel overseas to vote. You sit to Dominica, that's where the election takes place. You don't vote in New York for a constituency in Maho, or vote in England for your constituency in Laplin. You come to Dominica to vote. For you to meet the voting requirement, you have to be living on island, irrespective of what district or voting area you are, but you're on island. So why should the state take our limited resources and go to England or go to North America or Antigua to register people or verify people to vote in our elections? Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But that is,
that is why we have to push back.
Yeah, but that is what is provided for in section 51
right,
of the proposed act. Right, that's what it says. That and so if we pass the act as is, we're in trouble.
We're in trouble, serious trouble.
Right, and with the current commission as it is, or the thinking of those who appoint people, this part applies to a person to whom this part applies. I want to get at 51:1. As soon as practicable after the effective date, and in any event, not later than 30 days thereafter, the Commission shall by order declare a period being not less than 6 months to be the confirmation period for the purpose of this part, and may in like manner extend the period so declared. So, however, that the period initially declared together with any extension thereof shall not exceed 9 months. So it is a period between 6 and 9 months for confirmation.
So what he's saying, you can you can touch in Ireland for funeral, come for Creole Festival, and add up 90 days within that 5 years, and you qualify.
So yes,
that's what he's saying.
In order to facilitate the confirmation of registration of persons who are overseas during the confirmation period, the Commission may, by order published in the Gazette, on the website of the Electoral Office, and in such other thing, designate suitable places in such countries as the Commission may determine.
That's madness.
Now, of course, it is not right, but the reason, the underlying reason why this is offensive is because of the trust. That's my point of Sir Dennis Byron right there.
Yeah.
You have enough evidence whilst you were doing your consultancy.
He spoke with everybody.
No. While Sir Dennis Byron was conducting his consultancy, he had a reasonable expectation that there was sufficient time, because he was appointed he was recruited in 2019.
Yeah.
He was appointed in September of 2020.
Yeah.
The election was to be in 2025.
Yeah.
So it's not a figment of imagination. Whilst he was conducting the consultancy, the Prime Minister showed how much he does not respect him.
Yeah.
He called an election on the 6th of December 2022.
The same day he wrote Dennis Byron on the opposition leader.
The same day Dennis Byron wrote him.
Dennis Byron wrote him, yes.
So what I'm saying is, you do not need to go far to get a lesson on mistrust. That you cannot trust the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
It is not any Prime Minister, this one.
Yeah.
You cannot trust that one. And therefore, Sir Dennis Byron, from that experience, should have included in this confidence-building measures. You cannot leave that commission as constituted to declare any place outside of Dominica a place where people can be confirmed.
Cannot.
Well, we're not sure if there's going to be a bishop there or an archbishop or a cardinal.
Well, it should be, everything should be done on island.
Yeah, so the only place, as a Catholic, the only place that the commission can do is to designate St. Lucia in the OECS as our confirmation place, because that's where Bishop Miles is. Other than that, all confirmation and First Communion and baptism and registration has to be done in Dominica.
Yep.
And I am also asking that there be confidence-building measures inserted in the legislation. And there must be legal sanctions within the law to hold the commission, the chairman, the commissioners, the chief registration officer, the chief elections officer, and all his staff responsible and accountable to the people through legal and administrative sanction. That must be there. And then you must not stop the process of electoral reform by just those two bits of legislation as written. There must be an act called the Public Account Committee Act. This is the overseeing body, oversight body that oversees the work of Parliament, and it must not be just the Section 72 and two subsections that gives the power to the Public Accounts Committee. They must have legislative powers. They must have subpoena powers, and the committee must have powers like a judge in a Supreme Court to subpoena permanent secretaries and parliamentarians, because they are the ones. So if such measures were in place, we would be able to question the figures, Prime Minister, that you are presented and as Minister of Finance are not correct. And we are tended to believe that what Honorable Lennox Linton has presented is much closer to the truth. We want you to disclose every bit of information. Failure to so disclose, Prime Minister, that is reason for you to be dismissed from office, or you're going to be charged criminally.
Because in 2019 August, he said that after the final tabulation, the Honorable
Lennox
will be embarrassed, you know.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 2009. How many? With 2013, 4 years now.
Yeah.
4 years now, and he still have not done the final. The calculator have got enough zeros, I think.
Right.
Mr. George, somebody just confirmed to me that Karen Prevost is also acting PS for the Ministry of Education. So a lot of people listening to the discussion. Let me just reach out to Mr. Gabriel Christian, who is listening in Washington, D.C., and all the others. My good friend Alvin Thomas, how are you doing? Dr. Colmore Christian, Accra, Birmingham, and all the others listening to Q95.
Friends.
Yeah.
All friends of mine.
All of our good friends just listening to Q95 right now. We just want to say good evening to you. We had a very informative program this evening. Those of you who join us via Q95 Radio FM on Facebook, those of you who join us via Q95 Radio or listening to us at your homes, just want to reach out to you and say good evening. Thank you for joining us on behalf of the leadership of our party, Dr. Thompson Function, and everybody else. Thank you for being part of this journey. Join us again next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. here as we continue with the Workers' Voice. Take care. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And as we say, remember, 60,000. Sorry, let me make sure that I have my figures correct. I want to make sure that everybody know. And tomorrow, I wanted to be ringing that everywhere, saying that we have sold in 7 years. We sold 46,615 passports. Listen to me again, 46,615 passports in 7 years. That yielded $10.7 billion. And from that $10.7 billion with 2.1 is about $10 billion. So about 2.1 billion that came to our coffers in Dominica, and $7.9 billion out there. As Roosevelt Skerritt, as Anthony Hayden, as Emmanuel Nanton, as Miss Johnson, the new person who is head of the CBI program, Mary Therese Johnson. Ask each and every one of them for our money. And we have to demand that Roosevelt Skerritt give us our money. Remember, he said there will be parliament on the 25th. Dominicans are going to let Roosevelt Skerritt have parliament like nothing happened. It's up to you. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless you. And thank you once again for joining us.
Stage for a mother of 3 in the 60s. It came as a bit of a surprise for her husband.
So I had 3 kids, and at that time I told Chotu, I said, Chotu, I want to go out and act. He just looked at me and he said, wait, what is this act? I don't understand. Why don't you play bridge? He said.
Quite different, I feel. I feel like he maybe didn't quite get that.
So he said, oh, you want to act, all right. But what I said, that would mean hours away from home, and it mean rehearsals and things like that. So he said, you just check with my mother, because my mother, you'll be on stage with other men and things like that. I don't want her to feel upset. So I said, okay. So I went to my mother-in-law and I checked with her. She said, whatever makes you happy and my son happy, you just go ahead and do that.
Oh.